you need to be careful. You need to be careful. You need to distinguish between helium production companies and helium press release production companies. Okay.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Phil Kornbluth to the Kinvestor Report. President of Kornbluth Helium Consulting, widely recognized as one of the world's leading experts on the global helium industry. He's advised producers, industrial gas companies, and governments throughout the helium supply chain, giving him a unique perspective on how critical commodity is produced, traded, and consumed around the world. If you hadn't heard about helium in the market, pay attention. It is everywhere. We are in for a big shock. Today, we're going to discuss how these wars, sanctions, trade restrictions, and attacks on critical energy infrastructure are reshaping the global helium market and what those developments mean for producers, consumers, and investors. Phil, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good today. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we're obviously here to talk about helium, okay? Because it's all over the news. Most people in the world don't really understand anything about it, as you probably know. So let's just start with the basics. For those who don't know anything about the helium industry or don't follow it, and from the investor point of view, I guess, like why should they care about it right now? What makes it such an important commodity?
Well, okay, so most of the general population is aware of helium being used to fill party balloons and the Goodyear blimp, and maybe some people are aware that it's used to in liquid form to cool the magnets that are at the heart of an MRI scanner. But really, the lifting application, which is party balloons and blimps and things like that, only accounts for about 10% of the demand for helium in the world. Maybe it's a little higher than that in the US because we have a little more disposable income to spend on party balloons. But helium is an industrial commodity and has a lot of unique properties and a lot of it's used in some very important applications. And a couple of the applications that are really important. The largest application, is helium's use in manufacturing semiconductor chips. So with all the high tech interest in high tech and AI and all that sort of thing, the that's a really important application. Helium is also used by many of the rockets that are used by the aerospace industry. So people like SpaceX and Blue Origin and NASA and also use large quantities of helium. So, but helium has a host of industrial applications and that really make it important to society, a lot more than most people understand.
Can you talk a little bit more about where it's being used in the SpaceX program and things like that? Is it for the cooling again, or?
No, helium in the space exploration or the space program is used primarily to uh, purge the engines before and also to pressurize the hydrogen fuel. So helium is inert. It's colder than liquid hydrogen or whatever fuel is being used, and the helium is in gaseous form is used to pressurize that fuel to push it where it needs to go, basically.
And for people who don't know what inert means, can you tell them a little bit of what that means?
Sure. Inert means that it's non-reactive, that it doesn't combine with other elements. So that's a unique property that uh, it lends itself to helium's use in a number of things. Like you use helium instead of hydrogen in party balloons because hydrogen burns, and you can have if you fill, the we have every once in a while. A lot of people have heard about the Hindenburg, and the Hindenburg was a blimp that was filled with hydrogen,
Right.
and it caught fire and crashed in Lakehurst, New Jersey, many years ago. Actually, about 4 miles from where I grew up.
Oh,
And
and look at this. Now you're studying helium. Look at this. This is
now I'm
amazing.
studying helium. Go figure. But
Yeah.
I just one thing that's funny about that in the third world, there are people who use hydrogen to inflate balloons, and I would say, a few times a year, you read a press release or an article about somebody getting injured or badly burned because their helium balloon blew up.
Oh my.
And in fact, they call it homemade helium in some places in the world, and
Interesting.
it's hydrogen.
Interesting. Interesting. One of the big titles I read last week, I think, was that China is banning the exports of helium to the States. So, like, is helium like a scarce resource around the world, or is it more of an infrastructure and, you know, logistics?
The helium supply has been volatile, and over the last 20 years, really, we've had, if you count the current period, we've had five prolonged shortages uh, in 21 years. At times it's been in short supply. At times it's been in plentiful supply. And helium supply was plentiful in 2024 and 2025, leading up to the war in the Middle East. But the Qatar, depending on how you measure it, supplies around a third of the world's helium supply. And when most of that helium is produced as a byproduct of LNG production, liquefied natural gas production. And when the Strait of Hormuz closes, the LNG can't get to market. The LNG goes to market in these huge tankers. So if the LNG can't be produced, the helium that would be produced as a byproduct of the LNG also can't be produced. So the world was suddenly missing around a third of its helium supply, and we went from oversupply to a shortage, within a very short period of time. So obviously that caused a lot of concern about, well, are we going to have enough helium to keep the semiconductor fabs running in Asia? Or are we going to have enough helium to keep our MRI machines running, et cetera, and so forth? So that's, while the initial headlines all went to the fact that 20% of the world's oil and 20% of the world's LNG flowed through the Strait of Hormuz, after the initial surge of media attention, within a few days or a week later, people are asking, well, what else goes through the Strait of Hormuz? What else are we going to lose? And helium really got quite a lot of publicity there in let's say during March and April. I had I don't know if you want to call it my 15 minutes of fame or whatever it is, but I was getting multiple media requests daily
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, for about a month, and then it kind
That's
of.
it. No, hey, that sounds a little bit longer than 15 minutes of fame there, Phil. You had
Okay, well,
you
15
had a month
a
long of
month's worth
fame.
of fame. But it was all about the Strait of Hormuz being
Yeah.
closed, and that's still a very uncertain situation. I mean, we've been stopping and starting in terms of the peace talks and stuff, and meanwhile, there's been almost very little production of helium from Qatar. There's been a little,
Hmm.
and that's because not all of the uh, there is a requirement for natural gas for the domestic market, and to the extent that some natural gas was produced for the domestic market or is being produced for the domestic market, you do get helium byproduct, and you are able to, even though the LNG tankers have to go through the Strait of Hormuz, you can get helium containers out of Qatar without going through the Strait of Hormuz. There is a back door, so to speak. You could ship the helium containers, which just look like gasoline tankers. They look like
Hmm.
diesel tankers. You could ship them over the road to ports on the Red Sea, like the Saudi port of Jeddah, and load them onto a container ship there. So the helium is not totally cut off when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, but the great majority of it is cut off.
Yeah. So this begs the question, if the Strait of Hormuz opens up, do we go back into oversupply rather quickly, or was some of this infrastructure damage going to take years to kind of fix if a lot of this helium production is a byproduct of LNG? Because I know some of the LNG plants were attacked. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Well,
right?
that's a great question and a very, astute question. So there's 14 LNG trains. A train is like a separate processing plant, basically. There's 14 LNG trains in Ras Laffan Industrial City, which is where the helium plants are and the LNG plants are in Qatar. Um, Two of those 14 trains were badly damaged by missile strikes on March 18, 19. And according to Qatar Energy's information, they're going to be offline for 3 to 5 years for repair. And I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but that sounds like a long time, but that's what they've said publicly. So that takes about 5% of supply off the market long term. And then, meanwhile, on June 21st, the third helium plant in Qatar, called the Barzan plant, which does not process LNG waste gas. It's a traditional natural gas processing plant that produces gas for the domestic market. That plant, which had been down for a pipeline repair since December, nothing to do with the war with Iran, they were restarting that plant starting a couple days before June 21st, and they blew it up. So 13 people got killed, 66 other people got injured, and Qatar Energy has not been forthcoming. They haven't put any information out publicly about how long that plant is going to be down. But my guess is that it's going to be down for at least a year or more. That I don't know the exact extent of the damage, but that takes another 5% of world supply off the market relatively long term. So if there was a ceasefire in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz reopened, when production was restored, which would take a couple of months to get back to full production, we'd be missing roughly 10% of supply that we had before the war. So I don't think we'd go back to oversupply, but we would probably go back to something that looked like a balanced market between supply and demand. We'd be out of the shortage, but I don't think we'd be going back to an oversupply.
Okay. And going back to my previous question about how China's kind of banning exports in the States, does the U.S. have a strategic reserve of helium? How does that work?
Um, well, uh, we used to, but the government has sold off the majority of the strategic reserve to a company called Messer, a German company, a couple of
Mhm.
years ago. Um, so basically, we used to, but not really at this point. But we do have private storage. So the Messer facility is the former Bureau of Land Management government facility is now owned by Messer. Companies, including Messer, store a lot of crude helium in that facility. Messer has the largest quantity. Um, the Linde and Air Products have both built private storage caverns in Texas, in Beaumont, Texas. A French company called Air Liquide has a storage cavern in a place called Granau-Eppe, Germany. So the fact is that private industry has some ability to mitigate these shortages because there is inventory. And when there's the need, they are able to remove helium from inventory and take it to a helium liquefier and mitigate the shortage. And in fact, in the current situation, um, I would say that the private storage has probably mitigated around a half of the loss of production from Qatar. So we have a shortage, but not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, but so how long can that stand that way though? How long can it mitigate that shortage for? Like eventually it runs out.
Eventually it runs out. So, like,
Right?
if the shortage goes long enough, the inventory would get depleted,
Yeah, yeah.
and then we would feel the full loss of supply from Qatar. But
So,
thus far, it's private industry. The helium majors have done a really good job of um, partially mitigating the shortage.
yeah. Now, are these storage facilities from LNG produced helium or as a byproduct, or are they green helium producers that are shipping it from reservoirs throughout the United States?
The storage facilities that I mentioned, the three of the four, so the Linde Air Products and Air Liquide facilities, they're bringing bulk liquid helium that's extremely pure, pumping it into the ground, into these storage caverns, where it becomes slightly less pure, but it's still uh, pretty pure, but it's in gaseous form. So, when it comes out of storage, it has to be liquefied for transportation around the
Right.
world. Okay, now it doesn't really matter if the liquid helium was produced from LNG byproduct or from so-called green helium or whatever. It's just when it's going into the
Mhm.
ground, it's being delivered to storage as a liquid, but it's being gasified and it's stored in gaseous form in the ground.
Okay, we talked about these storage facilities that it doesn't matter where they're coming from, but if there were producing reservoirs, where there are producing reservoirs in the United States, where's the bulk of the production coming from in the States?
Well, the largest plant in the states is the Exxon plant in southwestern Wyoming, and that produces about 20, maybe 22, 23% of the world's helium. It's
Oh,
a very
wow.
large plant. It's been there for a long time. There are a number of smaller plants in the western United States. The Four Corners area has some plants, some production. There's some production in Montana, Colorado, but it's mostly out west. And Traditionally, there are four operating liquid helium plants that are connected to the Messer helium system pipeline, and they're situated in Kansas, Oklahoma, and the pipeline runs from Amarillo, Texas, to Bushton, Kansas. Now, historically, that was the area where the U.S. produced the largest quantities of helium. There was a big gas field there called the Hugoton Field, but that field is gradually becoming depleted. It's there's still helium being produced in that from that field, but not nearly as much as there used to be.
And then who becomes the most exposed to risk? Like what country do you think in countries?
Um, well, I don't really see it so much as a country risk, but it's more of an application risk. Now, what I would say, uh, there are certain countries that rely more on supply from Qatar than others. So, for instance, China was getting almost all of their supply from Qatar and Russia. A fairly even split, and they've only produced about 15% of their own demand domestically. So, when Qatar went down, there's an immediate kind of panic in China until they figure out where they're going to get their helium from. Uh, uh, Korea is another country that was pretty highly dependent on supply from Qatar. So the I would say the Asian countries are some of the Asian countries are highly dependent on supply from Qatar. Some of the European countries are get a lot of their supply from Qatar. But the way the industry reacted to the shortage, or the way they react, typically when they realize they don't have enough supply to meet all their contractual commitments, they declare force majeure. They then implement what they call a supply allocation, which is a form of rationing, and they have the flexibility to allocate to provide us a higher percentage allocation to the more critical applications. So, for instance, MRI is going to get 100% or close to 100% of their requirement. The electronics industry is going to get a very high percentage allocation of their historical requirements. Same thing for aerospace. And to do that, the less critical applications are going to be losing supply. So, a number of party balloon suppliers, they got notices as early as like the middle of March,
Really?
saying that we will only be able we may be able to supply you as much as 50% of your historical requirements. So step one, you're pulling out of storage, you're trying to mitigate the shortage, but you still have a shortage, and you're allocating in a way that tries to maximize supply to the most critical applications. And in fact, the chip industry has done pretty well, from what I understand, in terms of maintaining continuity of supply. Aerospace has done well. MRI has done a little less well. And part of the reason for that is one of the segments that the helium majors tend to provide a lower allocation to is wholesale customers. Wholesale customers meaning smaller gas companies. Okay. So to the extent that a smaller gas company is getting allocated from a larger gas company, and if the smaller gas company has MRI customers in their portfolio, those MRI customers might get hurt.
Right.
Another place where people have gotten hurt is, the Russians implemented export controls in the middle of April.
Saw that, yeah.
And that's been kind of a bureaucratic, slow, cumbersome process. But helium is getting out of Russia, but the Russian suppliers have been forced to apply for export permits on a monthly basis, and the export permits for China, for instance, have been granted pretty much on a regular basis, but it's been a month at a time so far, as far as I understand it. And countries that are viewed as less friendly to Russia are having, let's say, the permits are being granted not at all or more slowly.
Or a little bit more slowly.
Yeah. So for instance, some of the some of the Indian gas companies had run over to Russia to buy from Russia because the Russian supply has been discounted due to the sanctions. So they were at least temporarily cut off because because of the inability or the delay in getting these export permits. So here and there, it has been difficult. I would say India is one country that has had difficulty maintaining continuity of supply relative to other markets. But the critical applications have been supplied pretty well.
Okay. So the pricing is very opaque, right? Like these are all private contracts for the most part. Am I
Yes.
right? Do you have
Mhm.
any idea of what's been happening to helium prices out there? Like, what have you read?
Yeah. So let's start with what's less important, but what gets more publicity. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So
I
the
need more
spot
likes.
price, yeah, the spot price gets a lot of publicity, but it represents a small slice of demand, probably less than 5% of demand. But spot prices, doubled fairly quickly after the shortage hit, and in many cases they've tripled. But I don't mind saying that the spot price before the war broke out was, I would say, $300 per thousand standard cubic feet, plus or minus around $25. You can never say the price is X because it's not like published in the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or anything like that. So we're always talking about a range. But before the war, it was $300 plus or minus $25. Now I would say that if a gas company is buying spot loads, they're not going to find any below $600. They might be paying over $700 or even eight or $900. But it's more, I would say the spot price now is, I don't know, 650 to $800, something like that, or 650 to 750. Um, uh, and But contract prices, what I would say, they're stickier than spot prices. You can't raise them overnight. And what you've had is a combination of two things. So some companies, some of the helium majors, have implemented what we call pricing surcharge. And a pricing surcharge, most industrial gas contracts allow the supplier to implement a surcharge immediately when something big happens that disrupts the supply chain or increases their cost or whatever. So at least a couple of the helium majors implemented uh, immediate pricing surcharges on the order of 20%. But by now, all of them have announced, or maybe they all haven't announced it, but they're all doing it, uh, price increases, in the range of 20 to 30%. Now, the thing is, unlike a surcharge, you can't, it's not all contracts allow you to increase the price immediately. Uh, Most of them, at a minimum, require 30 days notice, but many of them say, hey, you can only adjust my price once a year on the anniversary date or things like that.
On inflation basis or something like that.
Well, some have formulas,
Oh
some
yeah,
have price
yeah.
adjustment formulas. So even though contract price increases on the order of 20 to 30% have been announced, uh, they flow through to the market over a more extended period of time. You don't get the uh, immediate price increases, but the price increases are happening throughout the market, and but they're not on the same level as the increase in spot prices. They don't double
Yeah.
overnight. They could double if this shortage lasts long enough, but if the shortage winds down in a couple of months, we'll end up with these 20 to 30% price increases, and they'll be sticky. They won't immediately go back to where they were.
When do you ever see anyone cut their prices once they get used to getting your money, right?
Uh,
Like,
exactly. Uh, it, one thing about the gas industry, the industrial gas industry, the contracts that for selling gas, not just helium, but for selling gas, they've been perfected over many years, and they are typically very favorable to the seller. So it's easier to raise prices, but typically much easier, much less resistance to raising prices than there is to lowering prices.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's just the way it works.
Is there a world where this starts to affect you and I, like our cost of living, our devices, our computers and technology, and
Um, well, the price of everything that uses helium goes up. So, it's a factor. The people who are buying the helium are passing those cost increases through. So, it's another small factor contributing to general inflation. But in terms of something more day to day, more, something that's more visible, you might go to your party store and there might be a sign on the window that says no helium. So,
hydrogen balloons only.
no, they're not going to say hydrogen balloons only. Not in the first world, but
Oh man,
they might say no helium today, or you can only get 10 balloons instead of 20, or it's going to cost you more. So there is that. I would be very surprised if an MRI in Canada or the US was impacted, but it's not out of the question. Um, but you know, Labs like university labs where they're using helium in their research or whatever, they tend to get a low allocation. And so some of this research work that would go on at a university might be disrupted, and folks who might even be furloughed if they if their experiments depend on helium. Welders might have to use different gas mixtures that don't use helium. You can weld without helium, but helium is preferable for certain types of welding. Uh, those would be things that the average person probably wouldn't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, you might pay a little more
Okay.
for your MRI scan or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so who are some of the bigger producers, like, or from an investor point of view, if you wanted to dip your toe in this, where do you look? Like are there publicly traded helium producers out there? Like what's out there?
Okay, so we'll start with the big guys, right? So the real big guys are Air Products, Linde, and Air Liquide. They're all publicly traded gas
What
companies.
was the first one you said?
Uh, Air Products and Chemicals,
Air Products and Company. Okay.
Linde and Air Liquide. And then you have Nippon Sanso and Iwatani. You have some large industrial gas companies, but I don't think we should spend a lot of time on those because the helium is a small percentage of their total businesses. These are large multi-billion dollar companies, and helium is typically 5 to 10% of
Right.
their business. So
So no
I
leverage.
wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't invest in them just for the helium. The what's different, what's new and different over the last more than 5 years now, but is that there now are quite a few pure play helium exploration companies who have done IPOs, and there's a lot of them without endorsing or saying anything good, bad, or
Yeah.
otherwise
These
about
aren't
any
these
of
aren't
them.
stock these aren't stock totes. These are just ideas for people to do their own homework and due
Yeah, I
diligence.
mean there's companies like Helix Exploration in Montana. I think they're listed on AIM. There's Pulsar. There's Blue Helium One in Tanzania, Noble Helium in Tanzania, a company called Renogen that was acquired by ASP Isotopes, which is publicly traded. There's a whole bunch of them,
Okay.
and most of them don't produce helium. They all produce helium press releases. So, uh, you know, uh, uh, you
Love
need to
that.
be careful. You need to be
Yeah, yeah.
careful. You need to distinguish between helium production companies and helium press release production companies. Okay. So if I was going to provide my honest view, if there's 60 of these exploration startups, most of which have not IPO'd yet, but a number of them have. Um, you need to be careful. I would tend to look. You want to look at the management team and have they been successful before? Do they have reserves in the ground that are, measured by a respected geology consulting firm? Are they actually producing helium? Now, from my standpoint, uh, when I look at the exploration startups, the one that I think the most highly of, and full disclosure, I'm a former board member of theirs, and I do some consulting work for them, but I really like North American Helium, and they're based in Saskatchewan. And the reason I like them is that they have 10 plants in operation. They have another significant plant coming on this fall, so they'll be producing something like 250 million feet a year of helium, which is substantial. So they're producing a lot.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, Another company that I'm interested in, but has not IPO'd. I don't know if they'll ever IPO. Is a company called Blue Spruce Operating in who's trying to develop a project that's kind of a mini Exxon in Wyoming. Now, Blue Spruce Operating has not even reached final investment decision yet.
Okay.
So but they're hoping to reach a final investment decision this year, and they could be bringing on an 800 million foot a year plant by the end of the decade. Most of the startups are smaller scale, but um, there are some companies with let's say significant aspirations, but you really have to look at them closely. I mean, a lot of them are not going to make it. Some of them will, and it depends on how, are they able to raise money? That's a real big one. I mean, North American Helium has probably raised $400 million.
Wow.
When you see a lot of press releases from some of these startups about raising $3 million or $5 million or whatever, that's not enough money to do a lot. That keeps the lights on and
Yeah.
pays the office lease, but you need to raise fairly significant amounts of money to uh, you know uh, fund an exploration program and construction of a plant and things like that. So, but yeah, there's a lot of them out there, and uh, some are very promotional. Some are putting out press releases once a week. Some are not very promotional, but it really does require some due diligence to separate the better companies from the promoters.
Yeah. Well, you didn't mention my company, or sorry, not my company, one of my clients called Altura Energy. So
Mhm.
I'll send you a package after this conference. But they are
I- I'm aware. I'm
yeah.
aware of Ultra Energy. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Right on.
They're one of them,
Yeah,
and
they're
they
one of them.
are producing, I believe,
Yep.
and they're one of the 20 or so.
Yeah.
And I'm not super familiar with Altura because I haven't followed them closely, but they're in that group.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. So if where do we see this market in 2 to 3 years from now? Do you think this has settled down? Do you think it all hinges on what's happening over in the conflict?
It really hinges a lot on what happens in the conflict. The best scenario is that the U.S. and Iran stop shooting missiles at each other and bombing each other and all that type of stuff. And when I say the best scenario, obviously depends on what side of this you're on. But
Yeah.
the let's say the best scenario for the world, not putting the helium business aside, is that
Peace.
peace breaks out. And the Strait of Hormuz reopens. We have freedom of navigation, and Qatar Energy starts producing again. They say they can be at 50% production a month after they flip the switch, and 80% after 2 months. Now, again, that does not get you back to where we were pre-war because we've lost 10% of supply for an extended period. But we would get back to probably a balanced market, which would say that the prices would probably stay elevated compared to where they were before the war. Now let's talk about the worst scenario for the world. The worst scenario is that this escalates again, and Iran starts shooting missiles at Ras Laffan, which is where all the Qatar production is, uh, and who knows how much production could be taken out for the long term. So that's the doomsday worst case scenario, which would be a really serious problem for the world and a lot of industries. And of course, if that were to happen, helium prices would skyrocket. They would uh, go back to at least where they were during Helium Shortage 4.0. They'd probably double from where more than double from where they were when we started the war. And that would be that would be a really good scenario for these startups because that obviously a shortage drives up price. It creates publicity. It makes it easier to raise money from investors. All those things, and when they sell the helium, they're getting a better price for it. So, and the other thing, of course, is that you know uh, people are more wary of geopolitical risk now than they
Hmm.
were a few months ago because even though everybody knew that Qatar was in a bad neighborhood, there was a bit of an attitude like, well, yeah, but nothing's ever happened. So, you know, it's probably okay. You know,
Hmm.
even June of last year when the U.S. and Iran bombed, excuse me, when the U.S. and Israel bombed Iran, Iran left the Strait of Hormuz alone. So, there's been maybe a little bit of a lull. People have been lulled into a false sense of confidence about the Strait of Hormuz. That's not going to happen again, I don't think, at least not for a long time. So there is more interest in supply from, let's say, geopolitically secure countries like the U.S., like
Hmm.
Canada. All right, so
More diversified supply around the world,
more
potentially.
diversified too. I mean, one of the helium majors was very overweight. All the helium majors are affected by the loss of supply from Qatar, so nobody's immune. One of them in particular was very overweight Qatar. They had 50% of the supply from both helium one, Qatar one, and helium two, which adds up to like 1 billion feet a year, which was, in retrospect, looks like an unwise bet. So I don't think companies are going to be looking to be that overweight in a country that has a geopolitical risk. So that helps startups in places that are not subject to geopolitical risk. And the way I've characterized it is that it was kind of a shot of adrenaline, right? Because the before the war in the Middle East, prices had been coming down for 2 years, and investor interest had been going down, and it had become harder to raise money. So, the war in the Middle East clearly was a shot of adrenaline for the exploration startups. And now the question is, well, what happens next in the Middle East? Do we go back to a balanced between supply and demand, or do we have this shortage going on for a long time? And just to mention that the four previous helium shortages, which I'm going to take credit for naming them, and I'm
Love
extremely
it.
creative in naming them helium shortage 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. That's about the extent of my creativity. But all of those shortages lasted at least 2 years, and one of them
Oh,
lasted three
really?
years.
Wow. Okay.
So the helium shortage 5.0, if we're going to call it that, um, is still a baby compared to
It's 4 months old.
yeah, it's a few months old.
Interesting. Okay. That's actually
So
really interesting.
it's still a baby. And one of the things that's been interesting to me, and this is different than previously, because there are a lot of folks who have a stake in, you know, they're rooting for higher prices and a shortage. Uh, there was a lot of folks rushing to name this thing helium shortage 5.0, like 2 weeks in. I mean, it was uh, because they were trying to fan the flames of publicity. Now I get that and I understand it, and uh, the jury's still out. I mean, I'm willing to go along with the fact that this is helium shortage 5.0 because it's been such a well publicized event, even though it hasn't lasted that long. It looks like it's going to last a minimum of a few more months. So it's and it could last longer than that. This could be an event that lasts a year or longer, and it really depends on events that are outside of anybody's control.
Phil, thanks so much for your time. That was a really fun, interesting conversation, and a conversation I think my audience will really can digest easily. Like you explained it very simply, very well. So thank you for your time on that.
Okay, Arlen, thank you very much.